says the nice computer lady. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And as we're still welcoming new and old friends to our Zoom channel, welcome to, oops, my screen just went out. That's strange. Oh, I think I just placed my mouse in the corner of the screen, which sets it into sleep mode. My apologies. You probably didn't notice that, but I did. We are completing Pirkei Avot in its entirety between now and next week. What I anticipate is we have 4 Mishnayot to go. So we're going to look at, in sequence, Mishnayot numbers 8, 9, 10, and 11 from chapter 6, which is, again, as we've described, a kind of appendix or addendum to Pirkei Avot. It begins with a qualifying statement or a kind of disclaimer that says, the rabbis wrote, bracket, these following statements, Bilshona Mishnah, which means in the language of the Mishnah. So these are Pirkei Avot-esque maxims that were presumably later compiled alongside and fused to the back end of Pirkei Avot as a kind of, again, appendix to the volume, but are still regarded as part of the traditional course of study if you're studying Pirkei Avot sequentially as we have been. We'll probably do 8 and 9 today, 10 and 11 next week. And our Siyyum, Siyyum is a traditional way of marking the end of a unit of Jewish study. It comes from the Hebrew root samech yud mem, sayem, which means to complete, to finish. And it's usually lightly celebratory. It's a nice occasion, whether the course of study has been long or short. A Siyyum is a wonderful way of patting ourselves on the back and also inspiring ourselves to continue our study. So that is going to take place, it's now confirmed, at the same time as our Thursday morning classes have been held, 10:15, excuse me, 2 weeks from today, on the 15th, at Westchester Reformed Temple. I haven't yet gotten the room yet, but Tim, our wonderful facilities director, who, by the way, is retiring at the end of the year, the end of this 2022 calendar year, and we're going to have a special Friday night oneg in his honor. He may still be available or on hand for special events, but he's retiring from day-to-day facilities management at WRT to concentrate on his ongoing responsibilities as the pastor of the Croton Falls Community Church up in Croton, where I had the honor of preaching the Thanksgiving sermon at their annual Harvest Home Ecumenical Service, which was held a couple Sundays before Thanksgiving.
Hey, Rabbi, how long has he been at the temple?
Tim has been at WRT, I think, for 8 or 9 years. And it was always his intention to make this kind of his last facilities management gig. Before that, he had been the head of dormitories at Columbia, and he's had a number of other facilities management kinds of work to supplement his primary work as a minister. So Tim came to us, I remember when he interviewed with us, and he said, I want to spend the last, decade of my working years serving God. And he really feels a deep sense of faith connection to WRT and our mission, which is why he's more than just about putting out flowers and tablecloths. He really believes that this is a way of serving God. So it's very moving. Anyway, Tim is putting together a nice, modest little bagel brunch for us at 10:15 on the 15th. So we hope you can come. It will not be Zoomed. So what I'd like to do is just dive us right back into our study. So we're going to look at Pirkei Avot chapter 6. Just give me one moment to bring it on screen. I seem to have dropped the tab by mistake. Okay, not hard to find, because Sefaria Makes it so easy. Okay, done. So here we go. So this is chapter 6, and we're going to scroll down to, we've done that one. Last week, we looked at this text here. No, sorry, number 7, which is a long form exegesis on a single premise. Great is Torah, for it gives life to those that practice it in this world and in the world to come. And then that's the only thing that this Mishnah claims. The entire rest of it, from here down to here, is all proof texting. And so we spent a little bit of time exploring the mechanics as well as the meaning. And much of our study from last week, if you need a review, or from 2 weeks ago, rather, since we took off for Thanksgiving, was a deep dive into these selected verses from Proverbs. So everything that is used as a proof text for the claim that Torah is great because it gives life to those who practice it in this world and in the world to come, comes from the book of Proverbs. And you can see the citations here in the parentheses: 422, chapter 3, verse 8, 3:18, 1:9, 4:9, 3:1, 3:2. Proverbs, I'm using this as an opportunity to review the central place of the book of Proverbs in substantiating the rabbinic claim that Torah gives life in this world and in the world to come, as the rabbis do claim, because Proverbs will continue to be the primary proof text material that we're going to use today. And that makes sense. As we saw last week, Proverbs, among its many themes, I would say the dominant theme of the book of Proverbs is a long form extolling of the virtue of wisdom, chokhmah. And in the rabbinic imagination, wisdom, this virtue, this quality, which may be attributed to a person who has attained or acquired it, is also a one-to-one substitute stand-in for Torah. So whenever the rabbis see the word wisdom in the Tanakh, in the original source material of the Jewish tradition, in scripture, to the rabbis, chokhmah, or wisdom, can be re-identified, is synonymous with Torah. So for the rabbis, what is wisdom? Wisdom is Torah. What is Torah? Torah is wisdom. The two are one-to-one interchangeable. I think that's an important master concept to review here, because it permeates not just this Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, but rabbinic thought entire. Whenever the rabbis talk about wisdom, they are actually, in their own minds, they're saying Torah, the pursuit of Torah, the study of Torah, the embrace of Torah, the imbibing of Torah, is exactly what is meant when we talk about wisdom in the Jewish tradition. So let's read a little bit. We're reading a Mishnah attributed to one Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. So if you're following in English, you can see his name there. I'm reading up in the Hebrew, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. So this is very interesting. There's a typo here. To the best of my knowledge, I actually should check my printed copy, because this clearly says Simon ben Judah in the name of Simon ben Yochai, and this one says Shimon ben Manasseh in the name of Shimon ben Yochai. I wonder if anyone else has a printed copy and you want to check. I should have done this before, but I have it, and it's not hard to find here. In this edition, which is the Koran, it says Shimon ben Manasseh, both in the English and in the Hebrew, right over here. I don't know if you can see it, but it says Shimon ben Manasseh. So I think this Shimon ben Yehuda is a typo. I should let Safarian know, because it is attributed to Shimon ben Manasseh. And when you click, as I've indicated before, on the name of a sage in Sefaria. It is an interactive link. You see all those little dots under the name that pop up. So you click on his name, and you can actually see now in the sidebar, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh was a prominent teacher and a disciple of Rabbi Meir. He lived at the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and was a member of the pious, quote, holy congregation. What does all of this mean? The most important line is that he lived at the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who is sometimes called Judah the Prince, and just as often in the rabbinic language called Rabbi, like rabbi. No article required, no first or last name required, just rabbi. That is an indication of how prominent he is. When you talk about Rabbi Judah Hanassi, or Judah the Prince, was the final of the sages of the Mishnah and the one to whom it's being anthologized, compiled, and redacted is attributed. He also, as his title, Hanassi, which means the prince or the president, the leader, indicates, he was the officially appointed liaison of the Jewish community of his generation to the Roman government. And the Nasi was an important figure in rabbinic times, in Mishnaic times. The Jewish community operated not independently, but at least at an arm's length remove from the dealings of the Roman government, which was sort of like the Romans would install a local governor over the provinces in their empire. And in the Judean province, in Judah or Judea, which is of course the part of the world that we're concerned with and where our history derives, the Jewish community would have a designated official known as the Nasi, who was often of the rabbinic class, often of the most educated class, so a teacher, a scribe, a sage, who would also be a kind of government official. So lest you think that the rabbinate is a political role only in modern times, think again, in ancient times too, rabbis, at least certain rabbis, were expected to be the political official for the Jewish polity that would interface with the foreign government in place at the time, and would probably help to negotiate things like taxation and judicial practice and how Jews would be subject to the laws of the land as the Romans dictated them, but also have enough freedom to follow their own customs and laws within the Jewish community itself. So that's a long digression, but I think it's important. We're talking about late in the Mishnaic period, 6th generation. So well into the 3rd century of the Common Era, the early first quarter or first third of the 3rd century CE, the early 200s. And this is a contemporary, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, in the name of Shimon ben Yochai. Here's the actual teaching. Hanoi, which is an interesting word, which means beauty, good looks, handsomeness. Hanoi, v'ha koach, that's a word you may know. Koach means strength. V'ha osher, which means wealth. V'ha kavod is a word we've talked extensively about in our class, which means honor or glory, dignity or respect. V'ha chokhmah, that's a word you better remember because we've been talking about it even as early as this morning, as recently as this morning, which is wisdom. V'ha zikna from the Hebrew word zaken, which means old age. V'ha seva, which, now this is going to be interesting because we have old age and another word that means old age next to it. And you can see what our translator, Dr. Joshua Culp, who translated for Sefaria Pirkei Avot, he translates this as old age and gray hair. Seva is actually a physicalized quality associated with a little bit of this and a little bit of this. Gray hair, but he puts old age in brackets, which is interesting because brackets usually indicate that something in the translation is being provided that is not in the text. And that is not the case here. We have 2 different words meaning old age, zikna and seva. and this is going to create a bit of a mathematical dilemma, so bear with me. The habanim, sons or children, na'el tzadikim. These things are pleasant, or becoming is the word they use here. Becoming, comely, pleasant. Latzadikim. A tzadik is a righteous person. I mean, you know so many of these words, even if you have only been a kind of casual traveler in Jewish literature and text. Vina'el le'olam. They are also becoming unto the world, which is a phrase that we're going to have to unpack. Shene'emar. I'm going to stop at the shene'emar, which means as it is said, which is always the introduction to the proof text. So pause right there for a moment. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, not Yehuda, sorry, Shimon ben Manasseh, that's a typo. Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Omer, Hanoi, good looks, Koach, strength, Osher, wealth, Kavod, honor, Chochma, wisdom, old age, and children are becoming to the righteous and becoming to the world. And I was puzzling over why would Culp put one of the old ages in brackets. You can see that here there are 8 qualities that are becoming of the righteous and becoming to the world, whatever that may mean. And so I did click on the commentary here to get a little bit more insight. So when you're using Sefaria, the way you do that is you just click, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. You should just be able to click here where it says resources, this tab. So if you're looking at Sefaria on your own screen, you click the resources tab, and then you get a whole bunch of textual resources to continue your exploration. You literally can do this from your couch. You click commentary, and then it has all kinds of different commentary, both traditional and modern. So if you want to know, for instance, what Rashi has to say about this Mishnah, you click on Rashi, and Rashi provides his own explanation of what is meant by some of these terms. That's helpful, but what's really helpful is to click the one by the actual translator. So Dr. Joshua Culp, who's a JTS ordained rabbi, conservative American rabbi, provides his own commentary here. It's a wonderful resource for studying Mishnah. He provides here some information that may be helpful to us. I hope that that is readable to you. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh was a colleague of Rabbi Judah Hanassi. He and another rabbi were part of a group called the Holy Assembly for one of 2 reasons. Either, and this is all provided in the Talmud, by the way. Where do we get this? It's Talmudic legends about the sages. Either they split their day into 3 parts, 1/3 in study, 1/3 in prayer, and 1/3 working. Or alternatively, they worked during the summer and learned Torah all winter. In other words, they were serious about their study of Torah. These legends are provided elsewhere in the Talmud. Similar to the previous Mishnah, this Mishnah employs mostly verses from Proverbs, as I explained in my little preamble. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh lists 7 qualities that when possessed by a righteous person are beneficial to him and beneficial to the whole world. Well, here's where we take issue, right? He says there are 7 qualities, and yet 8 are listed. In this list, he says, I have placed the words old age in parentheses, for they should not be part of the source. Old age is synonymous with gray hair. My apologies if this insults those who have gone prematurely gray. Furthermore, if this were part of the list, there would be 8 qualities and not 7. It is obvious from the end of the Mishnah that there are supposed to be only 7. Well, what does the end of the Mishnah say? At the end of the Mishnah, we have the line, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said, these 7 qualities, which the sages have listed as becoming to the righteous, were all of them fulfilled in Rabbi and his sons. So the beginning of the Mishnah actually lists 8. And at the end, they say, lo and behold, here are the 7. So Culp resolves that discrepancy by saying that old age and gray hair are intended to be a self-contained unit. It is 1 quality, not 2. Okay. I don't know how interesting that is to you. I found it modestly interesting. Questions or comments so far before we look at the proof text? Yep. Let's do Steve Maskett first and then Mara.
So I have the Hereford version of the Ethics of the Talmud from 1962, and in it he says that tries to explain the difference between the reason for both Yehuda and Menashe, saying that the passage is found in both Sanhedrin 11:8 and in a somewhat shorter form in Sanhedrin 11:4. And in the first, the real author is Rabbi Shimon, who's Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and whose words are reported by Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. In the latter, it says it's ascribed to Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. So
Perfect.
obviously there are two Talmudic sections.
Thank you, Steve. That really helps understand where Sefaria may be coming from when it attributes this to Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Shimon ben Yochai and not to Shimon ben Manasseh. The problem is that the Hebrew and the English that are printed on the exact same page here, web page, don't correspond to each other. So there's still that issue to resolve, but it is helpful to have the citations that you can find this elsewhere in Tractate Sanhedrin, where it is in fact attributed to Shimon ben Yehuda. So it's not actually just a name pulled out of a hat. Thank you for that. Mara.
I was kind of perturbed about why riches was on that list. Do you have to be wealthy to be righteous?
So let's go back to this, because I was hoping somebody would point out that there are some qualities where I think we can easily embrace the notion, as it says here, that the following qualities are becoming to the righteous. And I think that phrase too also requires a little bit of unpacking, and becoming to the world. Okay, so what are the qualities? We start with one that is, I think, at least in my view, equally problematic, Mara, which is good looks. So what is that supposed to mean? Does it mean that if you are a tzaddik, that you will have good looks? That's not exactly how I would translate what is being said here, which is good looks, strength, wealth, honor, wisdom, old age, whether that's one or two words for old age, and children. These things, these 7 or perhaps 8, are becoming na'eh, pleasant, comely, lovely, nice, good. It's a very positive attribute. They are good for righteous people and good for the world, or perhaps good unto the righteous and good unto the world. Does that mean that a person who attains these qualities is righteous? Does it mean that a person who is righteous is identified by these qualities? Does it mean that these qualities are beneficial in some way to a tzaddik or to the world? I'm not sure. If they are about the ability to be a person whose righteousness is influential, has a kind of, and that's at least, as I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking, well, what could be one possible way of interpreting this that doesn't require twisting ourselves or the text into knots? Because I want to be faithful to the spirit in which this is intended. One thing that occurred to me is that these qualities make it easier for a person to convey righteousness outwardly, right? So they have to do with the force multiplication effect that any one of these might have. Put plainly, a person who is put together, that's the word I often use, by the way, because I think it's about more than just good looks. Hanoi, which means good looks, but it conveys more than just handsomeness. And of course, these are probably associated with male figures. So I'm going to stick with words that are conventionally masculine in association. People who are good looking do often find themselves promoted to higher positions of leadership. That's an unpleasant but true statement, that it, or at least the ability to be put together, does actually increase one's ability to be heard and listened to. Similarly, wealth, similarly, the respect or prestige or honor that one is associated with having in a community. Wisdom almost speaks for itself. Old age, at least in the rabbinate, Gray hair is a positive attribute. Case in point, the number one thing that people have said to me over the last month or so is, "You look like a rabbi." I said, well, what does that say about the first 22 and a half years? But okay, I'm glad that I look like what I am. Now, and obviously it's meant as a compliment. What I don't look like with a beard is a Wall Street banker, a lawyer, or a Yankee, I suppose, a Yankees baseball player. There are some professions in which clean shavenness is considered a positive attribute, and there are some in which a beard, looking at you, Steve Maskett, is considered a positive attribute. So it's interesting, the semiotics of facial hair. And children, having a family or raising a family. These are all considered ways of extending one's reach as a sage. And remember, this is a book by rabbis for rabbis. So they're probably talking to rabbis like, how are you going to make sure that your quality of being righteous has a beneficial effect, not just on you, but on the world? Na'el olam. These are 7 ways to get there. Be put together, present yourself in a good looking way. Accumulation of wealth is, and this is where, Mara, I am struggling along with you, because it's not considered in and of itself generally to be a virtue in Jewish tradition. So I'm trying to figure out, does this mean there is some other or practical benefit to wealth? Judy Gross, please.
I think that what they have listed here is truly pretty privilege and things like that. But I think also one can consider wealth in a very different way than accumulating money. I think, and I even said this, I used that word in another text context last couple of times ago. I am enriched by this class. When you say I am enriched by something, it doesn't mean I'm making money by attending this class. It means that I am spiritually affected and improved by this. When you say someone is beautiful, do you mean that person has their eyes and their nose and their mouth in the right construct? Or is that person just a great person who makes you feel good, or who smiles or does things that are beautiful, but not physically concrete beauty? It's more of an emotional personality. So I like to think of beauty and wealth that way. I don't know if they intended it that way here, but I think it's an interpretation that makes me feel better.
Lovely. I really appreciate that interpretation. And by the way, share its wisdom. I agree with it. Wonderful. Dad and Mom.
I'm struck by how much things haven't changed.
Say more.
If it's not rich, good-looking people who tend to be our, call them influencers or whatever, then I'm totally wrong about that. But in everything from, politics to entertainment, think of it. People we tend to listen to are the rich, good-looking people. Yes?
Again, looking at it, there's a very fine line that I think that emerges when one is parsing that way between sincerity and cynicism. I think sincerely, yes.
But can I say, those are the people who are in the field out there with thousands of fans, whatever. But who would you have in your home who's beautiful and has a wealth of knowledge, and specifically we were talking about wisdom. So I think there are 2 different ways of thinking about it. But you're right. I'm sure this was intended for a mass of people.
Well, they can both be right. It can also be, again, it might be a kind of promise that, remember that this is now coming at the tail end of 7 previous Mishnayot, each of which extols the virtue of dedicating oneself to Torah. So one might propose that if you look at it in its greater context of what chapter 6 and even the tail end of chapter 5 and even all of Pirkei Avot has been trying to say, there's ample evidence that in the largest context of Pirkei Avot, this is not a text that encourages vanity and pursuit of riches to its own end. but rather it may suggest that dedicating oneself to Torah confers upon a person these qualities. And so there's almost like an incentive that, and we've looked at this many times before, there is this difficult friction, this tension between pursuit of the spiritual and pursuit of the material. And on the one hand, the rabbis denounce lightly, the pursuit of vanity and earthly riches in favor of the more spiritually rewarding pursuit of a life of Torah and righteousness. And yet at the same time, there's every now and then you get these teasers that, you know, I feel a little bit squeamish about quoting Woody Allen, given, you know, what we may or may not know about Woody Allen these days, but still in his heyday, he had many very funny observations. One of which in one of my favorite, probably my favorite Woody Allen movie, Love and Death, is where he's in conversation with his wife. I think I want to say her name is, it's not Tatiana, but anyway, Diane Keaton, where they're talking about how they can live the lives of impoverished Russian peasants who are still, you know, able to subsist on their love alone. And they're kind of like, one of them says, and money, and it's like, oh, money, like who needs money? And then Woody Allen kind of just goes, oh, money. It's like there's this funny, I'll have to find it, but this kind of very funny, very Jewish notion of, would it be so bad if I had money and good looks? And I think that you could point to a text like this to say, you know, we don't want to, we are not at the end of the day an ascetic tradition. We are not a tradition that says that money and beauty are absolutely, abjectly, always meaningless pursuits. We should live like a mensch. Okay. Steve, Arlene, and Norm Weiss in that order, please.
So I was struck by the juxtaposition of the righteous and the world, comely for the righteous and comely for the world, thinking about the preceding text, which was juxtaposing this world and the world to come,
right,
and wondering whether that's another way of thinking about the way that these attributes are absorbed, you know, as in some way in the world to come.
It's funny because the text doesn't actually go there.
I know. I mean, it doesn't say Olam Haba, it just says Olam.
Correct.
And the other one does have Olam Haba, and this one just says, you know, Tzadikim. But it felt like it was like it connected to it for me.
Yeah, could well be. And, you know, the rabbis are often, this is another way the rabbis harmonize what they perceive to be the discrepancies between the world as it is and the world as it ought to be, right? The world as it is a world in which the righteous toil in righteousness and often are unrewarded materially, are often consigned to anonymity or worse, or suffering. In the world as it ought to be, at least according to the rabbinic vision, righteousness would be its own reward. The study of Torah would provide its own rewards and would be materially beneficial, right? In the world as it ought to be, the study of Torah would be not just a spiritually remunerative pursuit, it would be a materially remunerative pursuit. And so the concept of Olam Haba is most often deployed as a rectification for the things that are wrong with the world as it is. And therefore, Olam Haba is an effective stand-in for what I often translate as the world as it ought to be. Olam Haba is actually very much about the rabbinic notion of justice and injustice, or what theologians refer to as the problem or the dilemma of theodicy. Theodicy, meaning God's justice, not Homer's The Odyssey, totally different. Theodicy means the problem of God's justice. If God is all good or all just, and God is all powerful and all present, then how come the righteous suffer and conversely the wicked prosper? Right? That makes no sense in a world in which God is both omnipotent, able to do anything, and and omnibeneficent, meaning all good. The righteous should not suffer in this world. And therefore, the rabbinic construct of Olam Haba is the way of saying, it is true that in the world as it is, the world of the here and now, as I often translate Olam Hazeh, the righteous suffer, the wicked prosper. In Olam Haba, the tables are turned and the injustice of this world is righted. And by the way, it rarely says this, but God's reputation is therefore left undamaged. You cannot accuse God of being unjust if the reward for the righteous may not be expressed in this world, but in the hereafter. Follow? It makes it, so a lot of this is a theological defense of God's justice. And that, I believe, is the tail that wags the dog of Olam Haba. It's actually that conundrum, that philosophical conundrum of why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper in the here and now, that prompts the rabbis to devise or adopt and share this concept of Olam Haba, Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, the here and now, the hereafter, as a rectification of injustice. Arlene.
Okay, so my thoughts were when we were trying to figure out what did beauty refer to, I think we were being very concrete. You've already indicated that this whole passage is really aimed for males. So you would not describe a male as beautiful under any circumstances. What you might describe him is handsome at best, but I think it might even refer to whether his presentation was attractive. Was he neat looking? Were his clothes put together in an appropriate way, but not necessarily his facial qualities?
Yeah, that's fine. I do refer to males as beautiful, but I have to do so.
Okay.
It depends on their age, gender identification, and receptivity to the idea. But you know, that's fine. If somebody said I were beautiful, I would take it as a compliment and not as an insult. And now, having said that, I think you're right, and that's why I say the word I often use is put together. Look, you don't have to be objectively handsome or beautiful to serve as a professional at Westchester Reformed Temple in Scarsdale, USA. You do have to be put together. Like there are just some communities where there is a certain premium placed on your ability to clean up nice.
Right.
You know, it's like these are things we don't often talk about, but there are things that I think about all the time. You know, we talk about it too as a clergy team. Like there's a whole conversation around, isn't it time in 2022 to ditch the big white robes and the high holidays? Those are a big throwback to 100 years ago. The idea of clergy wearing robes, and it distances the clergy from the congregation. It makes us less approachable. This is a conversation I have had with the clergy team many times. Those who advocate most forcefully for the wearing of robes tend to be, anyone know?
Women?
Niece types.
Women, yeah, that's what I just said. Right.
You're on video saying that, Alan. I would just remind you. Yeah, the women, right? Because the women feel that their dress and their physical appearance is far more scrutinized and objectified than the men have. So often the men are saying, I would be much happier showing up on Yontif wearing just my talis. That's traditional Jewish dress. A big white robe is borrowed from Protestant worship. Like it feels very out of step with 2022 Judaism. We would never do it on Shabbos. We only do it on the high holidays and on Shavuot at confirmation when the kids are also in robes. So really, we need to keep doing this, but almost always the women say, please, for 2 days of the year, could we not have the congregation commenting on my shoes or my dress?
And if everybody wore a kittel, you'd look like schlumps.
Yeah.
And that is traditional, right?
Yep. We've talked about this. Somebody said, what about wearing non-leather shoes on Yom Kippur, which is the tradition, right? Can I wear canvas sneakers on Yom Kippur?
Yeah. Sure.
And there are I've had clergy partners who say, yeah, we should. And then we're like, nope, in Scarsdale, you should wear leather dress shoes, even if it's not traditional. all of this is a long rabbit hole that we're going down about, do we really mean physical beauty, or do we mean some other quality more like put togetherness or the ability to clean up?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're still talking an awful lot about surface, whereas we think about Torah as depth.
Yeah. Do you want to say more about that? I appreciate the observation.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then, in that case, I'm going to go back to Norm Weiss. Did you want to?
Yeah, John, I wanted to say, I think this is a matter of syncretism, simply because this community was living in the Roman Empire, where if you've ever seen a Roman sculpture that wasn't beautiful and rippling in muscle, then it wasn't a Roman sculpture. I think when they talk about beauty and strength, they're talking about beauty and strength and nothing more.
That is an outstanding observation, Norm. I mean, all of the observations today have been, but I'm moved by the observation in particular because I've never thought of it before. And because we even spent a lot of time today exploring the relationship between the Jewish community and the Roman Empire at the outset of our study today. So thank you for bringing us back to that milieu in which these texts were composed. That's really a trenchant observation. I appreciate it very much. Judy Last, did you want to chime in?
I just wanted to say that when I looked at beauty and riches, I thought of my mother-in-law who lived to be 99. And she used to say to people, "You're beautiful inside and out." And so one day she said it to somebody and I said, "That person is really not nice." And she said to me, "Oh, you don't see the goodness inside of them." So I'm thinking that maybe when they talk about these words, they're really kind of superficial, the words. But if you're rich and you're a decent person, maybe you give to people who are less rich. And if you're technically, quote unquote, beautiful outside, then maybe you have a certain kind of goodness that somebody else might see. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful way in which you're grappling with this text as well. Okay, Dad, you can unmute and then we're going to look at the text again.
I think we've come a long way from last week's passage. Torah will be a cure to your navel and marrow to your bones.
Yeah,
that's the opposite of the superficial.
Lovely. And perhaps all of these things occurred to Judah Hanasi, who compiled the Mishnah and presumably had something to say about the track listing, you know, like on an album. Rare is the band that records the songs on an album in the order in which they are going to be presented to the world. And so sequencing is a big part of making an artistic statement. And I imagine that the sequencing here might be deliberately attentive to that dialectic between the marrow, the inner stuff, and then the outer stuff that's framed here. It's nice either way to observe the texts in dialogue with each other, because that enriches the conversation overall. Okay, so we're going to now look at the proof texting. Again, all of which is, yeah, thank you. Barbara wrote in a comment that Osher is also happiness, but this is actually a false cognate. So Osher with an ayin is wealth, and Osher with an aleph is happiness. So aleph shin resh, happiness, ayin shin resh, wealth, and probably not related. In modern Hebrew, at least among Israelis who are not from Yemen or other parts of the Middle East. This is a meaningful digression to answer Barbara's comment. Aleph and ayin are interchangeable sounds, right? Probably you learned in Hebrew school that aleph is a silent letter and ayin is also a silent letter. But in what is believed to be the closest dialect in modern Hebrew to biblical Hebrew, which is Yemenite Hebrew pronunciation, aleph and ayin are actually different. Aleph, they are both considered in Hebrew otiot groniot, which means throat letters that are phonated, not actually with the larynx, but just with the silent flow of air from the windpipe. But there's a slight difference in that ayin is correctly pronounced, or at least in the Yemenite tradition, correctly pronounced with a glottal stop, where you actually momentarily release the glottis at the back of the throat. So it is ayin, like that. Ayin comes from there, whereas aleph comes straight from the windpipe out. So makes no sounds. Aleph makes no sound, whereas ayin makes a like you almost just half swallowed, got something stuck in your throat. And you will, if you hear Yemenites chant Torah, they will accentuate the ayin, the difference of sound between the two. This is a very long way of saying, Barbara, nice try, but no. Love you, Barbara. But actually, osher with an aleph, meaning happiness, and osher with the glottal stop, ayin, are two different words. So there you go. Now you learned something about Yemenite pronunciation of Hebrew. Okay, so we're going to look at the proof texting, all of which comes from Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. As it is said, so the first text, gray hair is a crown of glory or beauty. And once again, is this an inner quality or an outer quality? I think Judy Lass, your notion that one points to the other or that they're somehow tied to the other is a lovely way of going about this. And that's sort of my master summary of everything that everybody else said, is that, is it outer beauty or inner beauty? It's both. It's either or both. It's both at the same time. That's the beauty of studying text. Gray hair is a crown of, so here's the text itself. So you just click on the proof text and boom, in Safari, it pops right up for you. Ateret with an ayin, there it is. Ateret tiferet with an aleph. Ateret tiferet seva. The crown of beauty is gray hair. B'derech tzedakah timatzeh. It is found on the road to righteousness. It is attained by the way of righteousness. Lovely poetic phrase. What does it mean exactly? Probably taken at its most pshat, surface meaning. It means that getting old, or the outward manifestations of physical maturity, are actually also indications of what one has attained ethically or spiritually. That's at least one way of reading through it. And all of this is by way of suggesting that there is a positive attribute, a positive or virtuous attribute associated with gray hair in Jewish tradition, with old age. And that's probably important in a world that spurns the aged and that diminishes the aged and that venerates the seductive promises of youth and beauty at every possible turn, right? I mean, so this is a corrective wisdom for our own day and age, in which old age is associated with decrepitude. In Judaism, it's the other way around. Old age is associated with righteousness, maturity, and even a kind of beauty. Alan, do you want to chime in on this?
Very briefly, we all always hear the expression wise beyond his years.
Lovely. Lovely. Yes. Or old soul is almost always a compliment, right? It's never saying he's an old soul, meaning he's decrepit. He's an old soul, meaning he has spiritual depth or maturity or vision. Okay. The next text, the ornament of the wise is their wealth. So 14:24, that one, unfortunately, they didn't make into a hyperlink. So, you just do a little bit of scrolling. 16, 15, 14. What did we say it was? 14:24. Sorry if you're getting a little bit of vertigo from my scrolling. Okay. Ateret, there it is again. Ateret means a crown. Ateret chachamim of the wise. Oshram. There's oshram with an ayin, meaning their wealth. Ivelet ksilit, ivelet. These are really, really tricky phrases to translate literally. They are poetic. I would almost describe them as like koans, like these kind of densely packed maxims that do not present clearly in the usual prose way of communicating subject, predicate, object. In this case, okay, you can see how they translated it. The crown, I don't like ornament. Atera is a crown. The crown of the wise is their wealth. That's a fairly good translation. The stupidity of dullards is stupidity. What a great phrase, by the way. Ivelet ksilim ivelet. What the heck does this mean? We're going to get hung up on this, I know. I don't want to spend all day on it, but I'd love to spend a couple minutes just reflecting on this interesting proverb. The crown of the wise is their wealth. The stupidity of dullards is stupidity. And they're meant to go together. It's a couplet. So A comments on B, B comments on A. I was an English major with a concentration in poetry in college. So things like this would occupy happy hours of my time as a student, being able to look at a couple verses like this and go, well, what the heck does that actually mean? Maybe just the first part. The crown of the wise is their wealth. Yeah, mom and dad.
I'll take a stab at this comparison, but it seems to say, how can you recognize a wise person? Well, they're rich. How can you recognize a stupid person? They're stupid.
I love that. It's interesting. Last night, I taught our 11th and 12th grade packing for college class. That is intended to be an exploration of the issues, conversations, dilemmas that young Jewish students may expect to encounter on college campuses after they graduate Scarsdale High School or wherever high school they go to in the WRT world. Sorry, I'm declining that phone call, which comes through my computer. So I was meeting with my Packing for College group, and what we did was we watched Dave Chappelle's monologue from opening SNL about 3 weeks ago, in which Dave Chappelle, the brilliant and not uncontroversial comedian, took on the subject of Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West, and his anti-Semitic comments on Twitter that got him banned and then welcomed back by Elon Musk and then welcomed to dinner at Mar-a-Lago just last week. So we talked about Ye and Kanye, but we talked especially about Dave Chappelle's monologue. It's 15 minutes of your time that I think is worth spending, though I don't want to tip my hat in one direction or another. The question to the students is this anti-Semitism? It's overtly anti-Semitic that Kanye West comments are, it's observably what Kanye West said is observably anti-Semitic. The question is what Dave Chappelle did in talking about it and in framing Kanye West's comments, and Kyrie Irving, by the way, basketball player who has been promoting a discredited film that's available to watch on Amazon that basically explores the nefarious lie that somehow the real Israelites are African Americans and that the Jews are imposters. It's really crazy and distorted and dangerous stuff. What was Dave Chappelle doing, though? Is that anti-Semitism? And then we watched the comedian Jon Stewart's response to it on the Stephen Colbert show. So it was a very interesting conversation about, is anti-Semitism about the intent or the effect of what is said? Does the context matter? Does the audience matter? What does one do when one encounters anti-Semitism, whether overt or covert? So, our students are incredibly thoughtful. I raise all of this because Dave Chappelle did make a number of statements that are just abjectly funny because he's a brilliant comedian. One of which is he was talking about Herschel Walker. And he said, this is finally, Dad, I'm relating back to what you said. He said, Herschel Walker is, and there's a long pause because you don't know where he's going to go with it. And then he says, observably stupid. And I'm like, yeah, the stupidity of fools is stupidity. Like, it is just so obvious, and there is no extra meritorious quality that comes with being a moron. It is what it is, as opposed to the qualities of wisdom and wealth, which, again, you see these efforts that the rabbis, and drawing on Proverbs, the biblical text, are making to somehow create some kind of link between wisdom, which we associate as a spiritual quality, and wealth, which of course is almost always material. Except Judy Gross started us out this morning by noting how very much wealth does not need to mean money, right? And she began by saying how enriched she is by her study, using that word very deliberately to suggest that there's richness that comes from money, but there's also wealth that is spiritual, and that is not an illegitimate use of the word wealth. And I value that observation very much. Joe Levine. Unmute, please. Nope, Joe's frozen, I think. There he is.
What does it say about what does it say about the dullards in Georgia? If we all can recognize the dullard in Herschel Walker, why is that no answer necessary?
Okay, the last part got cut off, and I don't know if that was, Zoom trying to censor you, Joe, or maybe I don't know, but I think I understand what you said. Yeah, at the end of the day, elected officials are just a commentary on the people who vote them into office. So I'm going to leave it at that. Full stop. We are a representative democracy, last time I checked, despite efforts by some to suppress votes. People who end up in office get there because people vote them into office in this country. So it's a chance to look in the mirror. I've been saying that for years, by the way. And obviously we're a divided country, so when an elected official is elected by an extremely slim margin, that too is an occasion to look in the mirror. Thank you, Joe. All right, so here we go. I just liked that one so much that I wanted to spend a little time on it. The remaining proof texts are as follows. The glory of youth is their strength, and the beauty of old men is their gray hair. Another line from Proverbs, which suggests, again, using all of these words that were claimed as the 7 attributes that come, remember, with the right, that are becoming of the righteous, and therefore, or thereby, becoming to the world. Grandchildren of the glory of their elders. So we did the glory of youth is their strength, the beauty of old men, their gray hair. And you just see the way the proof text works is we find the same words and we see how they are used in their context, and then that becomes a proof text. Grandchildren of the glory of their elders, and the glory of children is their parents. It further says, then the moon shall be ashamed, and the sun shall be abashed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and God's honor will be revealed to his elders. This is the one text not from Proverbs. So the idea, I think, is that the quality of kavod, of honor, God's kavod, which is what is cited here in Isaiah. I'm showing you the text on the right-hand side of the page. So this is this really striking prophecy by the prophet Isaiah, which says, then the moon shall be ashamed and the sun shall be abashed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. In other words, God's glory will be so bright, so shining, that it will put the sun and the moon to shame. For God will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and the presence, which is how they translate kavod here. You can see the Hebrew word kavod. Yerushalayim, the neged zakenav kavod. And there's this word here, zaken, which was used before to mean old age. So the quality of kavod, honor, glory, is associated with the elderly. That's how they're doing the proof text. They say, oh, I've got this great verse from Isaiah that links side by side the word zaken, meaning old age, and kavod. And the last thing I'll say on the subject of zaken, there's a midrash. There are many, many, many midrashim, rabbinic texts and traditions that say that the word zaken, zayin kuf nun, this root here meaning old age, is an acronym where each letter stands for another word for zeh shekana chochma. The funny thing is it's missing the chet, but meaning the one who has acquired wisdom. So in Judaism, chronological age is not laudable in and of itself. What is laudable is the acquisition of wisdom. And so the rabbis claim that the quality of zaken is not about how many years you have, it's about how much wisdom you have attained in your years. And therefore you do have people who are wise beyond their years, and you have people who are chronologically aged, but still observably stupid, to quote Dave Chappelle. Finally, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, this is the envelope, this is the loop back to the beginning of the text, said, these 7 qualities, that explains why Rabbi Kulp wanted to put old age in brackets or put it side by side with seva, gray hair, meaning that's 1 quality, not 2, so that there are 7, not 8. These 7 qualities which the sages have listed to the righteous, he says as becoming to the righteous, but meaning in association with the righteous, the tzaddikim, were all of them fulfilled in Rabbi and his son. So he turns this into a toast, right? A tribute to his partner, the compiler of the Mishnah, the greatest sage of his generation, Rabbi Judah HaNasi, Judah the Prince, better known as just Rabbi, and his family. So that's a nice thing to do. It's like you realize you're reading this whole thing, and then it's a toast to a friend and a colleague. I'm going to let a couple of comments come in, and then we'll dive into the next text. So Mom and Dad, you want to unmute, you can speak next.
The last line of the previous text uses the word leneged. Can you explicate about reveal?
I'm sorry, leneged is in the biblical text.
Can you put up on the screen the?
Oh, I see it. Yeah, sure. I see.
Because I'm thinking of the Shaviti prayer. Shaviti,
yeah, neged.
The neged tamid.
Yeah, neged. Here's the word neged. Neged is a. Oops. Sorry. Sometimes does that on Safari when I do not want it to. So we're looking in 8 neged. I found it a minute ago. Nope. Here it is.
It was revealed.
There it is. Yeah, there it is. So this word that I've highlighted, neged, is a preposition. It's a fairly common word in both biblical, rabbinic, and in modern Hebrew that designates the physical orientation of one thing to another. But it can also be used in a way that is not physical. So neged can mean any of the following and is used meaning any of the following. It can mean next to, alongside. It can mean sequentially one after the other. It can mean facing, opposite to. It can also mean in opposition to. It can also mean leading to or causative of. So Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid literally means I have set Adonai always before me, in front of me. Negdi, literally neged oti, neged me. Neged meaning, so does that mean opposite me, facing me, in front of me? It's usually translated before me, but there's another way of saying before me, which is lifanai. Lifnei usually means before, both spatially and chronologically, both in space and time. Chronologically coming before something is lifnei, preceding something physically or facing something is also lifnei. So neged is a really tricky word. It is probably most tricky. The most famous example of how tricky neged can be is in the way Eve in the Torah is described in relationship to Adam. So when Adam is in the Garden of Eden, God says, I shall create for the man an ezer kenegdo, which is usually translated as a helpmate. I think King James says a helpmeet. An ezer is clearly something that helps. Ezer is the Hebrew word meaning to help. Ezra, the Hebrew name, means help. Kenegdo is really hard. It's because it's a preposition that means 100 different things depending on the context. And Maimonides says this means that a person's mate should be one's equal, right? A person's partner in life should be one's facing, but also equal to. Another commentator, Seforno, says actually what it means is that they should be alongside each other, that one's mate should be in alignment with oneself. And I think a third one says that it is an intentionally ambiguous word that means that if partners collaborate with each other, then they will be in alignment, but if not, they will be in opposition. So that one's mate, one's spouse, one's partner, one's significant other is supposed to be variously in the Jewish tradition an equal, a partner, and if not, potentially an adversary. So there are all of these wonderful qualities to keneged. In the verse in question, it simply says, and I'll bring it back on screen so that I appreciate all of this chance to go into a deep well of preposition exploration. It says, Ki malach Adonai tzevaot b'Har Tzion, fairly simple phrase to translate. For Adonai of hosts, the God of the great armies of Israel, rules or has ruled from Melech, b'Har Tzion, from Mount Zion, uV'Yerushalayim, and in Jerusalem. The neged zkenav kavod, very, very hard to translate. And is neged, and God's glory is neged his elders. Corresponds to, in opposition to. The last one that you probably know is the phrase V'Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. It's at the end of the morning blessing for the study of Torah. So it begins Baruch Atah Adonai, etc. La'asok b'divrei Torah, but it goes on to say V'ha'arevna Adonai Eloheinu b'divrei Toratcha b'finu. God, please let the words of Torah infuse our mouths and our hearts and all of this. And then it goes on to say, and the following, Elu Devarim she'ein lahem shiur. These are the qualities without measure. Kibud va'av va'em, honoring parents. Gemilut chasadim, Talmud Torah, and it goes on and on and on, saying all the good, Abat Shalom ben Adam v'chavero, pursuing peace between a person and his fellow. The Talmud Torah keneged kulam. That's the last line. The study of Torah is keneged all of the above. Usually translates to leads to. You study Torah and it will lead to all of the good mitzvot you're supposed to do that have no measure. In other words, that are immeasurably valuable and you can never do enough of them. Or it could mean is equal to. Like on the scale of merit in Jewish tradition, on one side are all the good deeds in the world. And on the other side is the study of Torah, and they're equally in balance. Keneged kulam. Right? So preposition fun.
Well, that was certainly it.
Yeah, sorry.
Simple exegesis on that.
There you go. All of that from Keneged. But I'm the guy who in rabbinical school wrote a 34-page term paper on the phrase et asher from my biblical Hebrew, my class in Hebrew Bible. Et asher meaning that which. It's a grammatical concept.
Tell them about your professor of biblical Hebrew.
Yeah. It's Steve Kaufman, one of my all-time favorite and most difficult professors in any discipline at any time in my studies. I wrote a 34-page term paper on the phrase et asher, which means that which. I think I got a B+. All right, Joe Levine.
In one of the descriptions you just said, you used the word, and maybe this word helps in translating that difficult phrase. How about the word including? Nobody used the
Including,
word, this includes that in terms of a connection.
yes, potentially.
Okay.
Potentially a valid translation. It all depends on context. You know, Hebrew prepositions really are very tricky. All right, we're going to get into one more Mishnah. We surely won't finish it, but it will be worth looking at. And then it will start us off next week, and we will finish our study next week. One way or another, we will get through the end of chapter 6, and then we will celebrate at a Siyyum with a little bit of study on the following week, the 15th. But mostly just a chance to socialize and congratulate ourselves and inspire ourselves for the next unit of study, which will be Introduction to Talmud, which I'm working hard to prepare for January debut. Okay. So we're gonna just do this one in English. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, again, you want to know who he is, you click on him. He was a moderate scholar who lived during the Hadrianic persecutions. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma advocated accommodation with the Romans. Okay, not much else is known about him. I actually am not particularly familiar with his writing, but here it is.
Rabbi, what is a moderate scholar?
Yeah, I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. No idea. I assume it means he was politically moderate because of the last thing that's said here, which is that he advocates for accommodation with the Romans at a time of persecution of the Jews. Like, other than that, I would have to ask somebody because that question is way outside of my knowledge set. Okay. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma said, once I was walking by the way when a man met me and greeted me, and I greeted him. He said to me, Rabbi, where are you from? I said to him, I am from a great city of sages and scribes. He said to me, Rabbi, would you consider living with us in our place? I would give you 1,000 denarii of gold and precious stones and pearls. Now, my friends, this is really, again, totally separate source, comes from 100+ years earlier, and yet is linked to the theme that we spent most of our time and energy trying to figure out before, which is, again, this tension, this tense relationship between the pursuit of the spiritual and the reward of the material. How are they connected? Are they connected? Do we extol one while debasing the other? And so forward, and so forth. So, Rabbi, you're a great sage. Come and live with us. By the way, we're going to reward you very, very handsomely. Like, this is every rabbi's dream, right? To be invited to a community where said, we are going to pay you extremely well just to teach Torah. Wow. Hard to turn that down, right? Well, we'll see what he does. I said to him, my son, even if you were to give me all the silver and gold, precious stones and pearls that are in the world, I would not dwell anywhere except in a place of Torah. For when a man passes away, there accompany him neither gold nor silver, nor precious stones nor pearls, but Torah and good deeds alone. As it is said, when you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you are awake, it will talk with you. And again, look at Proverbs, and you can see what the antecedent to the pronoun is here. My son, keep your father's commandment. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Tie them over your heart always. Bind them around your throat. When you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you are awake, it will talk with you. And if you're still wondering what the it is, here it is. For the commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, and the way to life is the rebuke that disciplines. And if you want to see it in Hebrew, it's a line that you may know. Ki ner mitzvah, so the mitzvah is a lamp, v'torah or. That verse is inscribed in many a shul. I think it may be inscribed in the CJL. All of the verses in the CJL, the Center for Jewish Life at WRT, are from the Jewish tradition about light, because that room is very well lit just by the sun. So all the natural light that comes into the CJL was evoked and acknowledged in the inscriptions around the four sides of the room. Ki ner mitzvah, the mitzvah is a lamp, v'torah or, and the Torah is a light. V'derech hayim, Tochachot Musar, which is rarely quoted when usually just the first half of the verse is quoted. For the mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah is a light. And the way to life is the rebuke that provides discipline. A life that is chastened, presumably, by Torah and mitzvot. By the way, the next line is almost never quoted in modern Jewish discourse, at least outside of Orthodoxy. It will keep you from an evil woman, from the smooth tongue of her. If you want to know exactly how Torah will chasten you, it will curb your lust for women from the wrong side of the tracks, right? So it will study Torah. Here is one practical benefit for you. It will keep you from an evil woman, right? Okay, so not surprisingly, that excerpt is not quoted in Pirkei Avot. Okay, so we have the story of Yossi ben Kisma, who receives this invitation to make gobs and gobs and gobs of money just to live among this city. And he says, no, thank you. I will only live in a place of Torah. And he quotes further, when you walk, it will lead you, ba'olam hazeh, in this world. When you lie down, it will watch over you in the grave. And when you, and thus it is written in, and when you are awake, it will talk with you in the world to come. There's this verse which says, it will, so hang on, they give this, no, they don't give the source text. I think that's also Proverbs. Yeah, there it is. When you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you are awake, it will talk with you. So the order of events is walking, which is a daytime activity, lying down, which is a nighttime activity, and waking, which is a next day waking activity. But for the rabbis, they say, aha, this is more than just I'm awake, I'm asleep, I'm awake the next day. It's actually much bigger than that. It's waking means my life, sleeping means when I'm dead, and when I awaken again, when I'm resurrected unto life in the Olam Haba, Torah is the one thing that endures through all of this. Torah and mitzvot. They're with you when you're alive. They accompany you to the grave, as opposed to riches which don't. What does that mean? I'll ask you. What does it mean that Torah is with you even when you're dead? Torah and mitzvot. So the claim that is being made here is that earthly riches, at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. Whereas Torah and mitzvot have something that endures long after a person dies and accompany that person into the next phase of existence in the hereafter. What do you do with this? Yeah, Alan. Oh, unmute, please. Unmute, my friend.
No, people are calling me. I believe that it has to do with what people talk about you and how they remember you.
Yeah. Nice.
You know, they don't say he was a rich man and call it a day. They say either he was wonderful or he was nishkit.
Yeah. I rarely have given a eulogy where I talk about how much money a person made, even though that may be true. The qualities that are remembered, the qualities that are associated with us after we're gone. Torah and mitzvot. Our learning and our life. Thank you.
Isn't it also about the world to come? I mean, adhering to Torah is what ushers you into the world to come, and it's in the rabbinic tradition.
Right.
You know.
What is truly valuable? What do we take with us and what do we not take with us? You know, the rabbis also, I think was it in Pirkei Avot? I believe so, say that there are 4 crowns, right? There's the crown of priesthood, there's the crown of monarchy, and there's the crown of, even the crown of, it's either wealth or learning, I'm not sure, but the crown of a good name exceeds them all. The Shem Tov. So, mom and dad.
I think it's the rabbi's interpretation is really beautiful because it suggests that Torah never goes away. It's always there. You know, it's there, awake, dead, and in the world to come. Torah is the one thing that has the through path.
Yep.
I think that's very elegant.
Beautiful. I love the fact, Judy, that you put Tevye in the chat box. You must have done that a while ago, but it's still relevant here, right? This idea, the Woody Allen idea of, should we spurn wealth? Money. You know, and Tevye, of course, his most famous song in Fiddler on the Roof is If I Were a Rich Man. But at the end of the day, what does Tevye really care about? Cares about tradition and family. And that's why he's such a compelling character, not because he craves money. I mean, it's almost a joke. It's like, you know, but at the end of the day, what he cares about are his wife, his daughters, and his tradition. And what will happen to it in a rapidly changing world. I think that makes him a fascinating and sympathetic character. Michelle, did you chime in there?
Yeah, and yet we do honor wealth, and we extol people who get great wealth and then turn around and give it to support education. And of course, education needs to be paid for, and teachers are entitled to, you know, a living. At least they should be entitled to, you know, a living wage, and that supports it. So it is, and we, except in myth, I think in stories, do we actually honor the people who are the poor teachers, or who choose to stay poor? And well, I should excluding certain. I mean, I want to exclude, you know, certain traditional Jewish communities who then seek state and community support, but then you still need the money to come from somewhere. So there's always that balance, which might throw us back to that a third that you mentioned earlier in terms of how you spend your days.
Nice. Judy Gross.
I think it's really, I wish I knew more about other cultures, but it's very different in other cultures. I mean, the ascetic is the highest. And I think in Hindu culture, it's certainly not your belongings. It's have you attained the belief of the divinity. And it's very, very different from attaining wealth. It's attaining not earthly goods at all. And I know as far as teachers are concerned, the Asian community respects age and teachers in a way that certainly our American culture doesn't. And
very much appreciate that. Though as a meaningful counterpoint, you know, I've spoken to many of my Asian American friends, particularly those who come from China. And Chinese culture is actually, some have suggested, and not as a venerable quality, have suggested that they disdain modern Chinese people's infatuation with wealth. And a lot has been made of this, by the way, of what is it, like famous crazy rich Asians. There's a whole movie about, like, there is part of Chinese New Year. A lot of like traditional Chinese greetings are about getting rich. So fortune cookies are like there are, and I think every culture, it's not exactly an either or. Though I am with you, in traditional Hindu culture, I would say asceticism is encouraged. So, and in traditional Japanese culture, old age is venerated. But it is also true that there are cultures, I would say American culture by and large does extol wealth. Very much associated with the American dream is financial prosperity, right? So we're living in this, you know, amalgam of virtues and vices, and sorting through it all, I think you can sense the rabbis have their own struggles with it too. And you're clearly supposed to sympathize with this rabbi who is so willing to look the other way at the promise of vast riches because it won't provide him with a life of Torah, which is, of course, a life of meaning. But maybe you want a little bit of both. I don't know. I feel both. It's interesting, you know. It's interesting being a rabbi serving in a community like Scarsdale, which objectively is the second wealthiest community in America. That's just per capita. There's one community, there's one town in Orange County, California, which last year was ranked higher. But I and other rabbis who serve communities where there are people who are ultra wealthy and communities that are, again, objectively the 1% of the 1%, provide ample opportunities for those rabbis and those communities to think deeply about what is virtue and what is not virtue. I hope I'm not pushing anyone outside their comfort zones. I'm saying this as flatly and anodyne as I can. I don't wish to disparage wealth and opportunity and privilege, especially because this is also the most philanthropic community I've ever encountered. And as Michelle says, it's not just education. It's what can you do with money that can transform the world from the way it is to the way it ought to be, is a very powerful notion and a very Jewish notion. The idea that money is a tool for transforming lives and communities for the better is, I think, deeply embedded in the Jewish tradition. So we're not an ascetic tradition. We do not ask that people live like hermits or monks. We do ask that people have a thoughtful relationship with that which in our lives provides not only the resources to live and thrive, but also to live lives of purpose and goodness. That is a wonderful place on which to stop. So next week, we finish Pirkei Avot. We'll read the last line of this Mishnah and we'll read the next two Mishnayot. And I'm really, really excited to complete this phase of our Jewish journey of learning together. So I'll wish everybody an early Shabbat Shalom. And we'll meet again on the 8th of December. Thanks, friends.
Kol hakavod, John.
Shabbat
Thank you
shalom.
very much.
Sure.
Kol hakavod,
Thank
Henry.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. John.
Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.